You are listening to Unstoppable Actors, the essential podcast for ambitious, aspiring actors. With me, Louise, the artistic director of Standby Method Acting Studio. And every week, I'll be talking with you and sharing how you can become a paid, working, unstoppable actor, because you 1000% can. An acting career is doable. Are you ready? Hello and welcome to today's podcast episode, all about learning the lines. Before we get started, I just want you to know that there is an easier way to learn the lines than stressing yourself out, than trying to learn them by rote or by, covering a couple of lines up on your script and then seeing if you can remember them and then looking and realising, oh my God, I got it all back to front, mixed up, wiggledy-piggledy. There is literally an easier way to learn the lines without actually learning the lines. I really want to help you with this because I think learning the lines has to be one of the most unenjoyable things about acting, because it can bring us out in so much panic. It can bring us out in sweats. We can catastrophize till the cows come home that we're going to forget them mid-scene. And then we start imagining things going absolutely wrong with the performance. Like, oh my God, if I forget the lines mid-scene, then he's going to mess it up for everyone else. And then the audience is going to know, and then I'm going to go blank. And then I'm never ever going to remember them again. And then I'm going to be stuck. And then how do I even get out? And before you know it, we've got this whole thing going on in our heads. And it can be easier than that. It can be so much easier than that. I'm really going to share some things that have helped myself and that have helped my acting students really take the pressure off themselves with learning lines. Because the thing about learning lines is this: even though it is probably one of the least enjoyable things about acting, it's a thing that has to be done. I think we can all agree on that. Like, you literally just have to learn the lines. But we can speed it up. We can make it quicker. So we can actually spend way more time on the character, on the scene, on our technique, on our craft. Because the thing about when we're catastrophizing about lines or panicking about them, or we're coming out in sweats about whether we're actually going to be able to remember them, is it is taking us away from the reality of the role. So the one thing I want you to remember is that in method acting, we're always answering the question, how do I create truth when everything around me is fake? Now, if we're solely focusing on the lines and how many lines we've got to learn, and oh my God, I've got 10 pages and I've got 2 days to learn them for this self-tape, how am I ever going to do it? Or we're focusing so hard on trying to remember the lines, but they're just not going in no matter what we're doing, we've actually moved away from our craft. We've moved away from our creativity. And what we're doing in that sense is we're giving more of our attention to the lines than on actually creating the character and stepping into the character and breathing life into them. So that's what we're going to explore today. We're going to explore how you can learn the lines in a way that is fun, that is easy, that takes the pressure off yourself, that stops you stressing out. Because like the brilliant actor Ben Kingsley said, and I absolutely love this quote, I always come back to it and I share it often on our socials. He says, the camera does not like acting. The camera is only interested in filming behaviour. So you damn well learn your lines till you know them inside out while standing on your head. And, it sounds a bit harsh what he's saying, but it's true. Because if you can get those lines so deeply embedded in yourself, then you'll never have to think about them when you're on stage or at an audition or on set in front of a camera, because they'll just come out as if it's the first time you've ever said them. And so the key thing I want you to remember about acting is that it's about finding truthful behaviour. That's what acting's all about. Whereas learning lines is about memory. And we don't want to give so much of our attention to memory because we've only got limited time. When it comes to an audition, we haven't got weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to be able to get the lines down. In some cases, you might get a request for a self-tape and you've got literally 48 hours to get the lines down and create your idea of the character. So if you're spending the majority of your time on trying to learn the lines and remember them, then you're actually taking yourself away from the character, as I've already said previously. And then what's going to happen is you're going to go into that self-tape not very confident with the character because you've not made clear choices, because you've given so much of your energy and so much of your time to the remembering of the lines. And we don't want to do that. because then that means we've fully removed ourselves from our acting. And acting, as I've already said, is about creativity, it's about behaviour, it's about using our imagination. So before I dive into this, before I share with you these amazing tips and techniques and tools that have worked for me, they've worked for my students, I just want to let you know that applications are open for the next 14 days for entry onto our London and Sheffield 10-week method acting modules, and they're also open for the youth programme as well. Now, this is super intensive training. It's not for the faint-hearted. It is challenging, but it is training that will really help you create performances that your audiences just can't shake off, which in turn will help you land more of the roles that you want, so your acting career starts to progress quicker. So if you are interested in either the London or Sheffield 10-week method acting module, which begins in April, or the youth programme module, which begins in April, then go and check out the link which is underneath this episode. Let's talk about lines then. So the first time I ever came into contact with people worrying about lines was when I was at college. So I was 16 years old and I was studying performing arts at college. And everybody, and this is not an exaggeration, literally everybody was worrying about learning the lines. They'd come into class and they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out. Last night I had a dream that I was in the middle of the scene and I just couldn't remember the lines and I was just stood there frozen. And I remember thinking, God, that's really odd, because I don't actually worry about learning the lines. And then I started to question myself, going, is there something a bit weird about me that I'm not worrying about forgetting lines? Like, is this part of being an actor? Is this part of acting? Should I actually be worrying about lines? So naive, I know, bless little 16-year-old Louise. I should have just carried on with the confidence of going, oh, this is a bit weird. I don't worry about learning lines and remembering them or forgetting them. But no, I started to take on board everybody else's worries because everybody was talking about it so often. And so I wanted to ask you this question. Are we unintentionally and unconsciously affecting one another when we talk about whether we'll remember the lines or forget the lines? Are we making learning lines and remembering lines harder for one another because we give so much attention to whether we'll actually remember them or not? I don't know fully what the answer is to that. That's just a question that I'd love you to mull over at some point. I mean, I'm kind of gearing towards I think we are unintentionally affecting one another, because if we keep talking about it and we talk about it enough, then of course it's going to affect other people, because what's repeated is what gets embedded in us. So yeah, I never used to worry about learning lines or forgetting them or remembering them. I could just do it, and I could do it quickly and I could do it easily. And I never ever forgot them in the middle of a scene. And even if, for example, some scenes got cut shorter and we had to take out lines, I could remember quickly. I didn't need to keep going over the script. I could remember the new cuts, and I could remember what was taken out and what was staying in. But when I got to my professional training, I then did start to worry about lines, because people were doing it there as well. They were talking more and more about, oh my God, I've got so many lines to learn. Am I actually going to remember them? Am I going to forget them mid-scene? And so I started to become affected by that, and I started to panic about lines. And I'd never done this before. And I had a couple of incidents, or I say a couple of incidents, in fact, there were incidents, a couple of performances where this really manifested all this worrying. So I did a performance of Shakers. It's a brilliant play. It's a comedy. There's 4 women in it and they're multi-rolling, and it's very, very Yorkshire, which suits me down to the ground. And so I did this performance of Shakers where I was playing Adele, and the opening of the play is where I come in as Adele and I basically start the play. Now, because I'd heard people going on and on and on and on about forgetting lines for years, literally since I was 16 at college, as soon as I walked onto the stage, my mind went blank and I had the first line. And you cannot even imagine the pressure. The pressure starts to build up because everything is riding on you, because you have the first line. And I'm so embarrassed about this, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, because I want you to learn from this. I was panicking inside. So, of course, there was a lot of emotions building up inside of me, not positive ones, by the way. And I came onto the stage because I knew I've just got to get on there. I've got to do it. And I was like, oh my God, girls, I've just totally forgotten what I was up to and what time I was supposed to start. I'm so sorry. Now, that was completely ad-libbed, and that was definitely not the line. That was nowhere near what the first line was. But because I did that, because I thought, I've just got to get this started, and I was in it, I was kind of saying, like, I've forgotten my lines. Like, that was like the thought behind it. It made the other actresses panic. It really threw them off. So then the start of the scene, the start of the play was, God, it was appalling. I'm not even going to lie. It was appalling. And then a few years later, after I'd done my professional training, I did A Midsummer Night's Dream over at the Jumeirah Theatre in Dubai. And I'd had no problem learning these lines at all. Honestly, for me personally, I find learning Shakespeare easier than contemporary dialogue. I think it's just something about the verse in it and the meter in it. I just find that easier. And so I'd gone through rehearsals, never worrying about the lines at all. So in my mind, all of this worrying about lines was completely behind me. However, it wasn't. We were on stage one night, and I was playing Hermia, and it was a scene between myself and another actor called Chris, who was playing Lysander. And he was talking, and all of a sudden my mind just went completely blank. Like really, really blank, really empty. Like there was absolutely nothing in my mind. And all I could think is, oh my God, I literally cannot remember what my next line is. And then I was like, shit. I could see the audience. I could see them out there. I was like, I completely came out of the play, came out of the character. I was just aware that it was me, Louise, this girl from Sheffield, standing on a stage in another country with another actor who is getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to my next line. And I was like, shit. That is literally what I was thinking inside. And I was like, oh my God, I was making things worse for myself as well. I was thinking, oh my God, these people have paid a lot of money to come and see the show, and I can't even remember my bloody next line. What is it? And then I was like, shit, what if I actually can't remember my next line? What if it gets to my next line and I literally, and it's just not there and I can't find it? Like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to stand there frozen? Will Chris know? Will he help me out? Will it make him panic? Oh my God, I was having an absolute nightmare inside my head. I was just putting so much pressure on myself. It was making me panic even more. And then eventually, in the nick of time, because I was like, fuck, you're saying this, so what's the next bit? What's that? And I was like having to go back through my lines that I'd said before to try and trigger what the next line was. But thankfully, in the nick of time, I remembered them. But let me tell you now, that performance from there on in was terrible. It was absolutely terrible, because I was now no longer living through the reality of this character. I was not in Hermia's circumstances. I was Louise, the actress, panicking and stressing inside, just getting the lines out so they'd come out and I wouldn't forget them. And that's what I was talking about earlier. When we give so much attention to lines, we take ourselves away from our craft. We take ourselves away from our creativity, from our imagination. There was nothing that I could craft. I could not craft a good performance, because all I wanted to do is get to the end of it and get the lines out. And it was a horrible experience, really horrible. And then afterwards, I felt really guilty. I felt really bad towards the audience, because I was like, oh my God, they've paid a lot of money to see that, to see me panicking myself stupid on stage. I felt really bad for Chris, the other actor, because I was like, well, I gave him absolutely nothing to work with. And I really got into a bit of a spiral, beating myself up about it. It was not a nice experience. It wasn't pleasant. And as I'm sharing this, I'm sure many of you listening will be able to relate to that, because you would have had the same or a similar experience to myself. And this is why I wanted to create this episode, because once we can get down a process for learning lines, which is much easier, it's more fun, and we're confident in ourselves and we don't have to worry, then we can focus on the character and we can give our attention to the thing that we love the most, which is being creative, which is using our imagination, which is playing, which is essentially what acting is. So I went into the Unstoppable Actors group, which is a Facebook group that I run, and that's Standby Method Acting Studio hosts. And you are more than welcome to come and join it. It's a really fun, supportive community. We talk all the things acting. I share lots of tips in there. But I went into the Unstoppable Actors group quite a while ago, and I asked everybody what it was about learning lines that didn't actually help them learn lines. And this is what they came up with. So someone said when they're trying to simply memorize the lines wasn't actually helping them learn the lines. Somebody else said just sitting down trying to learn them doesn't actually help them learn them. Somebody else said that learning them in patterns wasn't actually helping them learn the lines properly or for the long term. And then another actor said when they don't connect to the lines, it just really blocks them and they're unable to learn them properly. You've heard from me, you've heard 2 stories from myself, and then you've heard, from a few other people from our Unstoppable Actors group. Like, what is it for you about learning lines? Like, ask yourself now, what is it for you that stops you learning them properly? You'll know because you will have had to learn lines 1,000,001 times. So what is it about the line learning process that is stopping you from actually learning them properly? So like Ben Kingsley said, you know them inside out, upside down. And I'd like to add, whilst swinging from a chandelier. You should know them that well. So what is it that's stopping you? Just have a little think about it. Because once you know that, then you're in a better position to do something about it. So why do we even worry about lines then? Like, what makes us worry about them? Well, it's because we don't want to forget them, obviously. We don't want to forget them. I think that's every actor's worst nightmare, as you've heard from myself, is getting to the middle of a scene, your mind going blank and going, oh my God, what is the next line? Because, well, especially when you're on stage anyway, because it's live and there's an audience there, there's a certain responsibility. It's not like film where we can cut and then we can start again and you can take a moment to breathe and refresh yourself on them. On stage, it's a little bit more dangerous because you can't just all of a sudden go, hey, audience, I'm having a mind blank. Like, let me just run off stage and get my script because I've totally forgotten my lines. Like, we wouldn't want to do that, would we? Because for me personally, anyway, I can only speak for myself, is I would feel very unprofessional doing that, and I would feel like I've let down the audience. So we worry about them, because we don't want to forget them. And also, we want to do really well with them. We want to do really well with the character. We want to enjoy the performance and we want to give the audience a good time. Whether that be an audience who's watching us at the cinema, on film, on the TV, or whether that is a live audience, we want them to enjoy it as much as we enjoy it. But here's the thing, when we are worrying about lines and whether we'll remember them, whether we're going to forget them, whether we're going to get them word perfect, whether we'll get all that 10 pages in or that 3-page monologue, when we're worrying, we are causing something called mental tension to happen in our minds. Mental tension is, the foundation upon which method acting was built upon to help us overcome the common acting problems where mental tension arises. Now, if you're not familiar with what mental tension is, it's a block. It is a mental block. And it can lead to us overthinking, it can lead to us overanalyzing, it can lead to mind blanks, it can lead to anything and everything that takes us away from our imagination and being present in the moment. So, for example, when I was doing that performance of Shakers, instead of putting pressure on myself to go in and get the scene started, I actually should have taken a moment to compose myself, to get grounded, to relax, because my mental tension was building and building and building and building to a point where I'd become emotionally chaotic inside and to a point where I was panicking and just trying to get anything out there. And obviously that is what happened. I just got anything out there and then it threw everyone else off. In the Shakespeare play, A Midsummer Night's Dream, when I was over in Dubai, actually, if I'd have used the methods relaxation exercise in the middle of the scene and given myself permission to relax, the lines would have come back quicker. So before I share with you what we can do about this, I want to share one other story. When I was 16 and I was auditioning, was I 17? Yeah, I think I was 17. And I was auditioning for my professional acting training. I did actually forget my lines in the middle of one of my auditions. But what I did is I didn't panic. I just said to myself, it's okay, Louise, they're going to come back to you. And I carried on focusing on the behaviour of the character. And then before I even knew it, the lines were back. And then the people who were on the panel who were watching me were like, well done, we really enjoyed your pieces. 17-year-old Louise was more composed than Louise, who was performing after a professional training. And that's the thing, you have to be composed. And that's what we teach you in the method. We teach you how to get in control of your performances when things start to go wrong, even in the middle of them. So you can get back into your imagination and back into the character quicker without anyone ever realising that inside you fluffed up a little bit. So what can we do then? How can we learn the lines without actually learning the lines? And how can we make it more fun? How can we make it less stressful? How can we make it just one of the parts of the process that we have to do it, we enjoy it, it's done, boom, now I can focus on the character? Well, the first thing, and I'm going to offer you 5 tips here. The first thing I think we could be doing is changing the narrative around learning lines. You know, instead of worrying, going, oh my God, am I going to remember them? Am I going to forget them? Oh, I struggle with lines. I struggle remembering big, long paragraphs. I struggle with learning them verbatim. Like, if you are constantly saying that, then that is going to become your reality, isn't it? So if we can change the narrative around learning lines, if you can tell yourself, you know what, actually, I'm good at learning lines. Actually, I've got a good memory. I'm really good at learning lines. If you can change the narrative and tell yourself something similar to that, that will eventually get accepted by yourself, because whatever you tell yourself repeatedly becomes a belief. So if you're constantly telling yourself, I am not good at learning lines, I struggle to learn lines, it takes me a long time to learn lines, then because by a process of you saying this over and over and over and over and over again, it has now become a belief. So then a belief becomes your reality. Whereas if you repeat a different narrative, like I've already said, about telling yourself that you're good at learning lines, telling yourself that you can learn lines easily, you have fun learning lines, I'm good at learning lines, I learn them with ease. If you tell yourself that over and over and over again, eventually, and I'm not saying straight away this is going to happen, because you've got to practice this, you've got to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. But if you can keep telling yourself this, eventually you will believe it. And then when you believe it, it will become your reality. So I think that's the first thing, is we have got to change the narrative around learning lines. Because if not, we are just going to be putting this insane amount of pressure on ourselves, and we are going to hit points where we do forget them and we do have little mind blanks. The second tip is stop trying to learn the lines. Just stop trying to learn them. When you actually sit down and put pressure on yourself and give yourself time where this is it, this is my time to learn the lines, and you're just trying to learn words, they're not going to go in. What I've found over the years that I've been acting and that I've been coaching actors is that unless you are very logically minded, we're not actually very good at remembering facts and words. Because as actors, we are very feely people. So the lines have to mean something to us. And when they mean something to us, then we learn them quicker. But if you're just sitting down and trying to memorize lines and words, they are never, ever going to go in, because there's no connection to them. Instead, what you want to do is you want to learn the story of the character, learn what's going on in their internal world for them to even say these words and to say these lines. So if you start playing detective and start asking why are they saying this? What's going on underneath? How are they feeling? What's their intention? Then that is going to make learning the lines so much easier. Which leads me into my third point. Understand the character's intentions. What are they trying to do with these words? What effect are they trying to have on the other person in the scene? Or what effect are they trying to have on themselves? What is their intention with these words and these lines? Because when you know this, it is far, far easier to remember them than trying to remember them by rote. Because when you try and remember them by rote, like someone said in the Unstoppable Actors group, you're going to learn them in patterns. And when you learn them in patterns, they've got no meaning to them. There's no feeling behind them. You might as well just be a little robot going through a scene, robotically spewing out words. You know that that's not what you want for performances. I know that's not what you want for performances. So tip number 4 then is to move. You have got to start making movement a part of the line learning process. Because movement is scientifically proven to help the lines go in quicker and for them to stick in. So when I was at school and I was in year 10 and year 11, we used to have this teacher called Mr. Rose. He used to make us do a brain gym. at the start of every single science class. So we did biology with him, and we did physics with him, and all the sciences. Now, I'm not very good at science, right? And I really wasn't that interested in the periodic table. But what Mr. Rose used to do for us is he used to make us do this brain gym where you had to move different parts of the body whilst you were saying different elements in the periodic table. So, for example, you might move your left arm up in the air while saying helium. And we'd have to shout it out in this like silly voice. And then you might move your right arm up in the air and you might say another element on the periodic table. And we just go from the beginning of the periodic table till the end, every single class just moving different body parts. It was absolutely bonkers, but it worked. It worked because we all remembered it. And it was actually a much more fun way to remember the periodic table, which I had no interest in. I really didn't care about. So I'm not saying that when you're learning your lines, you need to say the first line with your left arm in the air, and then your second line with the right arm in the air, and then your third line by kicking your left foot out, and your fourth line by kicking your right foot out. Well, you might want to try that and see if it works for you and see if it's fun. They will obviously go in if you do that. But what I like to do is I like to walk around as I'm learning them. And I get even more clearer than just walking around willy-nilly spewing lines out. What I do is I walk to every thought. So if you're not aware, a thought is up to the end of a sentence. So one sentence equals one thought. So I move on every single thought. So I might move in one direction for the first line. Then I'll change to another direction for the next line, and then another direction for the next one. But I'm not trying to focus on learning the lines. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing as I'm doing this movement is I'm trying to find the intention and the motivation behind each line. What effect are they trying to have either on themselves or the other character? And when I do that, the lines just go in. I've not even actively learnt them. They've just gone in because I'm actually getting creative. I'm getting curious. I'm getting my imagination going, and I'm moving. Now, the fifth and final tip is to find another actor to run through the script with you a few times. So once I've done all the walking around in different directions for each line and figured out what the intention is, I then sit down with another actor, and I don't even take the script away from myself. I'm not even trying to remember the lines. What I then do is I try and throw the intentions at this other person, still with script in hand. I'm still using the script. And then, as if by magic, the lines have gone in. So I want to tell you a quick story. Another one. A couple of weeks ago, I had an audition, right? And I thought it was for the following week. I don't know why, I just got completely confused. Anyway, it turns out it wasn't for the following week. It was actually for that day. I'd woken up and I had literally an hour to learn the lines, to make some choices about the character, to get their intentions down, to make choices about the scene, their emotional journey. So what I did is just go through all of these tips. Every single one that I've shared with you, I went through them instead of stressing myself out about remembering the lines. And it took me an hour. It literally took me an hour to make the character choices, to get the lines down, to connect to the character, connect to their feelings, find something from my life experience that I could draw upon. And I had the best time in this audition. And I got really, really, really good feedback from it. And I think there's a lesson in this. And the lesson is I didn't have time to overthink. So, when I'm talking about changing the narrative around learning lines, instead of telling yourself like, oh my God, I find it really difficult, or gosh, I struggle with big long paragraphs, or oh, I can never get it word for word, or oh God, I hate learning lines. I didn't even have time to think about any of those things because I knew I only had a set amount of time. I had literally 1 hour before the audition. So there was no room for any mental blocks, which is what we call mental tension in the method. There was literally no room for it. And as I've said, I really enjoyed it. I really, really, really enjoyed that audition. And there was a big lesson in me for that. And I was like, maybe I should just leave them all until like the last minute instead of overthinking. Because when we overthink, we're not creative. When we overthink, we become logical. When we overthink, we take ourselves away from our imagination and away from our feelings and away from our heart. And we get stuck in analysis paralysis. So I hope these tips have been useful for you, and I hope they've got you thinking. And I'd really love you to put them into use and see how you get on with them. But what I'd also love to know is there anything you feel I've missed out that has massively helped you with learning the lines? And if there is, drop a comment. So all you need to do is just scroll to the bottom of the page and leave a comment with the things that have really helped you learn the lines. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode and you're listening on Spotify or Audible, I would really love it if you could leave a review, because it really helps me help more actors who are struggling with the things that I talk about, and it helps them get the help that they need. I will see you in the next episode. I have absolutely loved hanging out with you, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Unstoppable Actors, the essential podcast for ambitious, aspiring actors. Now, if you did, I'd really love you to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and leave a review. And if you would like weekly injections of inspiration, you'd like mini method acting challenges to keep you making progress with your dreams, come and join the most supportive acting community online by clicking the link in the notes to help you become an unstoppable actor.